I'm good with dog interruptions. We're always good with dog interruptions.
Okay, because we have a 100-pound Piradoodle in the background here, and she's pretty chill, but she may at some point be like, "What's going on?" Yeah. Yep. Um, oh, and now I have a phone call coming in because my parents have a landline. Like that never happens. Yeah, exactly. I'm like, what's that ancient technology in the background?
Like two millennials. Like, what?
Exactly. Like, who would do this? It's almost like you're faxing. This is horrible.
Halley Sutton is back this week. We're going to talk about, I'm sure we will talk about all kinds of things like we always do, but we're also going to talk about what makes things scary.
Yes. I feel like I've been, first of all, thank you so much for having me back. It's always a pleasure, truly. I feel like I've been seeing stuff online on Instagram, and then even from some of my friends that like, and I guess it is sort of the time of year. It's like it's so deeply summer, but like Michael's has all the spooky stuff out. So like instead of Christmas in July, we're moving into like Halloween in July. So this feels very right, like summer spookiness.
And Starbucks just released when their fall menu will happen. So it's just all coming together. It's like on like August 20th, we'll have access to pumpkin spice lattes again.
Wow. I'm not ready for it to be fall yet. I keep being like, gosh, I'm going to do so many fun things this summer. And I'm like, the summer is almost over. It's happening.
This is the summer I feel good at the pool. And then I'm like,
yeah, right? Totally.
Well, first of all, not to brag to everybody, but we saw 8 movies this month.
Wow.
And so many of them were so good.
Oh,
and I'm so thrilled. And like, what am I going to do for the rest of the year? Because like, it's definitely because it was July that there were that many good ones.
Totally.
But now like every other night we're like, is there another movie out yet? Like, is there something we can go? We're like addicted to it.
So but can I ask? Sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, so is that 8 movies in theaters?
Yes.
Wow.
So as bookish as I am, I guess this is my most movie-ish trait. We have AMC really close to us. And if you do the AMC A-list membership, you can see unlimited. We can see up to 3 movies a week.
Oh, wow.
Month, and it's $18.99. So like if you go to 2 movies in a month, you pretty much pay for it.
Yeah, so that's a really good deal.
We've always had that. Mm-hmm. I know. So we've always had it. And the nice thing is you can go to any AMC in Indy. So there was one that we saw called Oddity, which was released by a really small production company. It was released by Shudder. And I think it just had a really small release rollout. Mm-hmm. So we went 35 minutes away to a theater we've never been to go see it, but it counted under our membership.
I love that. That's kind of like, do you remember the glory days of MoviePass?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I had MoviePass when I was in grad school, and my friend Olivia and I would go like 4 nights of we saw like everything that was in theaters because it was so cheap. It was $10 a month and you could see 1 movie a day. And of course they went under because they weren't making money because that's an unsustainable business model. But like for 6 months, we were like every night we were like, we can't afford not to be going to see a movie. We got to go see another movie. So,
we've been like that sometimes. We're like, have we even seen 2 movies this month?
Right.
Because that's like what would be like making it the deal. And we're like, I don't know. Let's see what's on.
Yeah, totally. Oh, amazing.
It's so easy too because like we've just been working later, but then we have dogs, as everyone knows, who want so much of our attention. It's actually so hard to watch an uninterrupted movie.
Yeah, I can see that.
So some of it is like we'll get to the end of a day and we're like, is there a 7 or 8 o'clock showing? Like, let's get out of the house. The dogs can stop whining at us. We can watch a movie. And I think it's just like kept us going. We've been like working on a lot of projects. Just, I'm not trying to sound like that person. Just like,
no, I get
a lot of our. And it's been perfect to just leave and go watch a movie. I feel like it like rejuvenates us quickly.
I feel the exact same way. Definitely my movie going habits have changed since COVID. Like I don't go see movies in theaters nearly as much as I used to. But there is something, partially because I remember how annoyed I am by other humans when I'm in a movie theater and I'm just like, ugh.
Yes.
But like there is something different about going to see a movie in a theater and like you're not paying attention to anything else. You're sitting there, you know, it's such an experience and it's such a treat. Like I've gone to see 2 movies in theaters this month, which is not your 8, but like actually is a lot for me. So I'm excited. I think we might have some crossover about things we've seen. So
I probably,
yeah.
I think I saw enough of them to have some crossover.
I know, you're like, I've seen everything in theaters, so yes.
Like, I wish there was more, so probably. But yeah, it is. I remember Seth Rogen in an interview talking about how seeing a movie in a theater, it's also like a collective experience.
Yes.
And when it's good, I'm with you. There's sometimes you get in a theater and you're like, I hate people. Why am I here?
Totally.
But with like comedy was from his perspective, is like you like he's comparing it to church. Like you like go to this special place to like experience this special story with other people. And I was like, that is so romanticized. But then like we go a lot when there aren't tons of people, so it's not always the collective part, but
yeah,
it is nice if you're just in the dark. AMC has comfy recliner seats, so you're also comfy.
Oh, I love that.
Just experience it.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. And like, first of all, that's very Nicole Kidman, the like, we come to this place because somehow heartache feels good here. Yeah. But like there is, and it's interesting. I feel like it's particularly true in comedy, but it's also true in horror and even like in bad movies, like the chemistry of the theater. Like if people find it really funny, like I think you tend to find movies funnier if everybody around you is laughing, or like if everybody around you is really tense, or like movies that you see where people are all kind of like, this is ridiculous. Like, even if you're not loving the like that communal experience, like it really does change how you feel about a movie for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like I almost considered going to see Madam Web in theaters for the collective experience part of like laughing at it.
Totally. Everybody being like, what's that crazy line where she's like, he was there with my mother when she was studying spiders in the Amazon or whatever, and like having everybody laugh. Like that's such a fun moment, you know?
I know. Yeah. We were like busy enough that week that around that time that we were just like, we weren't ever prioritizing it just because we knew we weren't going to like love the movie. But I was like, I think it would be funny with other people. But what I will say was actually so much more fun with people was Deadpool and Wolverine.
Oh, I bet.
Why did it feel like I said the wrong title? That's the right title.
I don't think so.
Yeah, it was the first time we've been in a theater that was completely packed. Because like sometimes we go at like 2:00 too.
Sure.
And we can just like go back to our work. But this was the first time we were in like a pretty large theater that was packed. And it was like all of the inside jokes they managed to like sneak in, the Easter eggs, like the cameos. Like it was cool like being with everyone, being like like when a really big cameo happened, literally everyone was gasping. So
that's awesome.
I do enjoy it sometimes with all the people too.
Totally. I think it like it is a collective experience, and I love that. That's cool. Yeah. I want to hear about what you saw.
Okay, so obviously Deadpool and Wolverine was one of them. I always loved Deadpool, so I knew I would love it, and still I'm like, was that a 9.7? Like, was that almost perfect?
Wow.
So I loved that one that much. It's so fun. Like, don't take it seriously because it doesn't take itself seriously. And go have fun. That's my, I don't know, that's my commandment to everyone.
I love that.
So yeah, I loved that one. Twisters. We saw Twisters.
Oh, I haven't seen it yet. I haven't seen the original, which is like, okay.
I hadn't either, and I went in expecting it to be like a 6. Tyler's really nostalgic about the first one, so he really wanted to, and I was like, it'll probably be like a 6.
Yeah.
I came out and was like, was that like an 8.8? Was that a 9? Like that one shocked me too. Like,
I love it.
I just feel like they did a lot well, and it's another one that's really fun. Like expect it to be a fun summer movie, but then also the character development that happened, I was super impressed by. It felt very Save the Cat. Like you discovered her misbelief, and then challenging her misbelief is like such a big part through it. So I thought it was cool that it had character development. Of course, I thought it was cool because Glenn Powell was in it.
I love Glenn Powell. He's got like chemistry with a rock, you know? Like
I know it's like the ongoing joke on TikTok. Like, no matter who his co-star is, like, he loves chemistry with any of them. You could have him play with a robot.
Yep, it's true.
He's amazing. He's just amazing. Did you see One But You? Was that the one?
What one? Yeah. Anyone But You?
Why can I not think of her name? I love her.
Sydney Sweeney? Yes, I did see that. I actually really liked it. It was cute. I
liked that one more than I expected as well.
Agreed.
I was just mad.
He really is. And one with him that's like a random from, I want to say like 2016. It's a Richard Linklater film. It's called Everybody Wants Some. And have you seen this?
I keep seeing it on TikTok. I haven't watched it. So I like need to.
Yeah. It's great. It's really good. Am I echoing a little bit?
I mean, kind of.
Okay.
Not a ton.
Okay. So, sorry, I'm hearing it a little bit in my thing. So Everybody Wants Some I loved that movie. It's like the story of these like baseball players in the 80s, and they're all just trying to like meet girls and stuff, but it's got this like weird core of sweetness to it. It's really great. He's in it too. He's so good.
I know I need to add that in gear. Said he got to know him in Scream Queens, which I did not end up watching on TV, but he says his character is hilarious in that.
Yeah.
Power of Glenn Powell. But
totally.
Yeah, I loved that one. That one was seriously so much fun too. Like, very much enjoyed it. And then we saw Longlegs. This actually is not in chronological order, but
that's fair.
We saw Longlegs. I know you saw.
I did too. Yes.
So this kind of, I have a couple. I'll still complete my list of 8, but this kind of brings us to our subject. Is that in what I want to give credit where credit's due, in brilliant, scary horror movie marketing, they really played up that this was like the most terrifying movie of the decade.
Yeah.
And I think everyone and their mother saw the clip of like Micah Monroe's heart rate like skyrocketing and going up the first time she saw Nicolas Cage in his costume. So brilliant marketing. Like I want to point out that it got all of our attention. Like I think it got people's attention who didn't know about the movie.
Oh yeah, for sure.
So I obviously wanted to see it. But a lot of people before I had even seen it were like, it was not the scariest. That was not the scariest and blah, 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 blah. And so it had me thinking about what is scary because quickly to say, I enjoyed the movie. Like I really
Me too.
I think I'd give it an 8. And it reminded me of reading thrillers with like FBI agents and serial killers.
Totally. It has like it's like, I think it has more in common with say like Silence of the Lambs or Seven than like a lot of other horror films. So it's, to me, it felt more, although it does have horror elements, but it feels, I mean, it is horror, like they're marketing it as horror and it definitely, it gets that. But like, for me, it did feel more like thrillery procedural, but like really well done. And I would say I give it probably like an 8 too. Like I was on board for maybe 85%. And even the ending worked okay for me, but there were certain parts of the story that I kind of came out being like, well, what? And I don't want to give anything away. Maybe we can talk about it offline, but like, but I would say solid movie. Also, can I just point out that we're in the middle of the Olympics and you keep rating the movies like 8.8. I'm like, it's the Kate Olympics for the like July films is what's happening.
Oh, this is amazing. The Olympics has infiltrated my brain.
It really is.
Oh, that's awesome. But yeah, I felt the same way about it. And it's beautifully shot. So like it's also very fun to look at and to watch. And
totally.
I like a lot of what they did. There are definitely like some scary moments. Like it didn't terrify me. Like I wouldn't say I was terrified at any point. So when people have asked me about it, they're like, is it so much not worth the hype? I'm like, I don't think that's the question. Like, my answer is it's a really kind of what I'm saying. It's a really good FBI agent going after a serial killer. I've said it's more like Silence of the Lambs too. But if occult stuff and devilish, like devil worship stuff terrifies you, then yeah, it's a terrifying movie. So that's like the flip side. Like for some people, I've talked to people who are like, that movie scared the shit out of me. So
yeah,
I've just been
what is scary?
How scary is, yeah.
Mm-hmm. No, I totally agree with you. And like Nicolas Cage is great in it and wearing so many prosthetics that it's kind of insane. And there was one jump scare. I'm trying to remember. I don't remember exactly where it was. It was sort of in the middle. And I was seated next to a stranger and I jumped and I said, fuck that. And the guy just started laughing. So like it did at least get me at one moment. And I know I was trying to think when we started talking about this as the topic, I was thinking about like what is scary to me. And so much of it is, I mean, we can dive more into other stuff, but like,
no, I'm down.
It's almost the unseen thing to me that like when you're threading out that tension, particularly in the beginning of a movie before you see the big bad, that to me is always so like, and this movie does that really well. You know, there's so many like almost moments where you know something's going to come and then it does or it doesn't. And like just the kind of atmosphere of it. Oh God, just incredible.
Performance. Like, Micah is like I hope she gets nominated. I don't know if she will because it's like, who knows? But like she like held her mouth in a certain way.
Yes.
Most times where like you felt tense with her, like you were like, oh my God, it's about to happen.
Yeah. And she had this sort of like almost antisocial affect. Like I don't know, she's great. She was a knockout performance in that for sure.
Yeah, I was about to tell you something, but that needs to go to the list of not spoiling talking time.
Okay.
So I will tell you something else that was just funny about that. But
yeah,
it's like, I think so many people, I was even saying like, even people at Bookstagram, like someone posts a story and they're like, well, this was okay. And some people who are like, this is terrible. People were having these like big reactions to this movie. And I just thought it was kind of silly because like you're saying, there even are some scares.
Yeah.
It is creepy. And what you said, that's what I was thinking about kind of in preparation for this as well, is like when I describe it to people too, I talk about like the movie Longlegs sets up a really large feeling of dread. And
yes,
and it stays all the way through, like exactly what you were saying. Like you feel that, and you're scared and don't quite know enough about anything to know what direction things are going.
Totally.
So then, I would say like this was like a dread-inducing movie to watch, or unsettling.
Yes.
And then like sometimes it's like. I was trying to think of the word. There was a word I used for another book recently, but I think there are like more specific, maybe there's subgenres of scary is also a way to look at it.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Where like, I think we have other words we use that maybe more accurately describe what kind of scary it is.
I agree with that. And I think you hit the nail on the head, which is like they took a marketing tactic to get people into the theater by being like, this is the scariest movie that came out of Sundance and all these different things. And like, I don't know. I don't remember exactly what they said, but it was to the effect of like, people are fainting in the movie theater. It's so scary. And so you kind of set yourself up for failure when you do that because there's no way you can hit that hype, but you're trying to hit that hype to bring people to see it. So I understand it's like a weird dichotomy. Overall, I really enjoyed it, actually. I thought it was great. Some of the stuff about why, like how it wrapped up, I had questions about like, well, what about this thing? And like, why did that? But like, I always have story notes about stuff. But like overall, I really enjoyed it. And I loved it was like set in the 90s. It had this kind of different like feel to it. It was very vibey. And I think that's like one of the great joys of horror films. Yeah, it's like vibiness, you know?
Yeah. I agree. Like, it is still just like a really good movie, and I'm really glad I watched it in theaters too. Like, that's another
Me
part
too.
of it. But you're talking about the marketing. That's especially because that's kind of what we do for people. We're not like marketing,
Yeah.
but creating content that's useful for something.
Yes.
That's what was so interesting to us about all the social media clips that discussed the movie ahead of time. I was like, this is going to be so cool to see how this plays out. And they had, that was from, oh my gosh, why can't I think of the production company? Neon. No, not Neon. Yes, Neon.
Is it A24 or?
It wasn't A24. Oh. I think this was Neon. I'm going to look it up.
I bet you're right.
So Neon, Neon's the production company. This was their first movie to ever make 20 million in its opening weekend.
Oh, amazing.
A ton of money. So cool story to that marketing. Like, I'm sure some people would say like, oh, you were taking advantage of people by calling it scary, but it's not that it's not scary. And
right.
Like, it's there.
That's the purpose of marketing, is to get people to like see or read or do something, you know?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think it's cool. We were like, whoever came up with that is like getting a bonus right now.
I agree. We did not talk about the premise of Longlegs at all. Should we tell people, or should we just assume they know?
We probably should.
I was like, just going.
I was just going right into it, guys. It's the inhaler. I told Halley ahead of time. It's my inhaler today. So if I'm speaking much faster, that's why. And it sounds like I just glossed over Longlegs.
Not at all. But I was like talking about it, and then I was like, oh, we haven't explained the premise. We are not a film podcast.
Right. So the general premise is an agent played by Micah Monroe, who I keep talking about, Lee. She's mildly psychic. Her point is like she gets stuff right 1 out of like 3 times. And so she gets brought in to work on a case with a serial killer who is doing really strange things to families. That's like, because the trailer doesn't really give you as much as I just gave you, so I'll probably leave it at that. But that's where you get the feeling of it feeling like kind of like a police procedural, because your main character is an FBI agent who is intuitive if she's not psychic.
Yes. Yeah. Well said. Very well said.
Thanks. just 5 minutes later.
Whatever.
If anyone was, I mean, they could have paused and like Googled or something. So
yeah, totally.
So, but I feel like that one like really sparked so much conversation with both moviegoers, and I was even seeing it with bookish people. And then I saw, man, I'm losing my voice.
Oh no.
Sometimes I try to power through it, and then I'm like, they're just going to be listening to my voice vibrate. So what was I? Oh, I was transitioning into, it's been interesting seeing the different conversations that have happened around that movie with book and film people. And there are 2 guys, and I will link it in the show notes. Sometimes I feel like on TikTok especially, I will like know someone by their face, but it doesn't mean I like pay attention to their username. Like, I even know I follow them, so I will link them. But there are 2 guys who do like film reviews, just like of almost every film, and like they just do them really well. And one of the guys was like, he started one off with like, everyone said, and he wasn't even being this snarky, but the gist of it was like, everyone said Longlegs was so scary, but I just saw this movie and this one actually scared me. That was the one called Oddity that I was saying had such a small, did you see it?
I haven't. I actually don't know anything about it, so I really want to hear what it's about and what you thought of it.
Yeah, so this guy went on, so I'm like, you have my attention, because apparently I'm just obsessing over what's scary. That's what I did in July. And so he was like, and also,
No,
like,
that was me. I'm sorry. It's my parents' grandfather clock.
I know. I realized it after like the second sound.
Speaking of scary things, it is for sure haunted by like a Victorian child. So,
No. Oh God. Um, so he said too, like, I don't think a lot of people are gonna know about this one because this is from an even smaller production company called Shudder. Um, but he was like, I was scared so many times. And also it was a great
ooh,
story. So I was basically like, we have to go try to see this.
yeah.
And it was a super small release. And so like the
Mm-hmm.
first 3 days, it came out on July 19th. The first like 3 or 4 days, there would be like two showings, like one afternoon, like maybe at like two, and then one at like 9:45. And we
Yeah.
couldn't make any of those work in the first few days. And so then all of a sudden, it was only at like theaters way far away from us, and at like 9 o'clock was like the only showing. So we did it. We did it one day. We finally got it to go watch a 9 o'clock movie. Um, and I'm really glad we did because it was another one that like that
Oh,
in the theater. So it is about a woman who is blind and also psychic. And she
interesting.
feels like when she can touch things, like touch personal items, she knows like the story of the people,
Hmm.
those items. So her twin sister is brutally murdered in. Now I'm having hiccups, guys. I'm sorry.
Oh no.
I'm like, okay.
And I'm coughing like we're just falling apart, man. Oh God.
I think I get hiccups more when I take my inhaler more. And I think my
Oh
doctor,
yeah.
it's because you're doing more of the like breathing, but
Yeah. Yeah,
whatever.
I'm sure.
So her sister is brutally murdered. Her twin
Oh
sister
no.
brutally murdered. And like the vibes though, like, yes, she got murdered. Sad, sad moment. The vibes though, she got murdered in this like remote, I don't know where it takes place, if it's Scotland or England actually, but it's in Europe. And it kind of looks like, those like castles that were just,
Yeah.
but it's just like kind of like the outer walls, like four outer walls, and
Mm-hmm.
the whole house is even filled in. Basically, it's this like kind of, it's like that, it's like a house around a courtyard in these little like narrow parts, but it is so moody on the inside and like dark and wonderful. And like we got out of the theater and Tyler was like, I would never live somewhere like that. And I was like, I would never stop reading a place like that.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
For sure. Okay. And was it scary?
Sister is murdered there.
Okay.
The twin sister is murdered. And then we're not following her, we're following her and psychic sister. But she was murdered there when they were like doing some renovations. And
Yeah.
then her ex-husband, the ex-husband of the dead twin, like brings an item to the living twin, Darcy,
Interesting.
and because she thinks if she can touch this item, she can figure out who killed her sister. So
Yeah.
then it becomes, which I, in my like mini review of it, talked about how it's really a genre mashup. Because then what it starts to feel like, you are with a detective solving a case. She's just
Mm-hmm.
like psychic is the thing that works for her. So it's like
Yeah.
she can find certain items, she can figure out what happened to her sister.
Mm.
So then you're kind of on like that route, but there's definitely the paranormal stuff because she truly is connected to the spirit world. So there's
Interesting.
paranormal horror. There's kind of like a murder mystery element. Well, that's
Mm-hmm.
exactly what it is. Um, and definitely also just a thriller. But there were some big jump scares, and there were two
Oh
times
yeah.
where Tyler, even in the theater, looked over to me and he was like, "This is terrifying."
That's awesome.
Yeah,
Okay, what's your rating of it? I'm writing it down in my notebook because I want to watch it now.
I think my rating of it, if I was going to do my Olympic scoring, I think I would give it
Yes.
an 8.8 as well.
Okay, pretty good. Pretty good.
Maybe a 9. I'll have to think about it
Mm-hmm.
because I thought it was going one way and it didn't. But sometimes that doesn't mean that it should have, just because like that's what came to mind for me. So
totally. Yeah. Oh, I love that. You've really intrigued me. I love a good like paranormal. I also love, I was thinking about when I was prepping for our conversation today, I was thinking about like what are some of my favorite scary movies that I've seen over the years too, and like what is scary to me. And oftentimes they wind up also being films from other countries, or set in other countries too. Because I think that one of the things that horror does so well is it often connects to like historical events, or you know what I mean, like often like a recurring theme of stuff is sort of like we've buried this horror but it can't stay buried forever. And like, so to me it's always interesting to see like that sometimes in American stuff, but also in other, like for example, like not to move away from Oddity, but like I love Guillermo del Toro's work, especially like Pan's Labyrinth or The Devil's Backbone. Which you haven't seen Pan's Labyrinth?
No.
Okay, you are in for a treat. It is a masterpiece, and it's all basically about like truly it really is about like Spanish fascism and like the history that they like have, like the way that like this evil is kind of like bubbling up in all these other places. Oh my god, you are in for a treat. It's like a dark fairy tale, but like a very dark horror fairy tale. It's so good.
I feel like I've always known that it was a movie that I was supposed to watch, like that I would like, and then I never do, so I'm adding it to my watch list.
Yes.
So that it's there.
Mm-hmm.
Nice.
And another one like that is a movie called The Orphanage, which is also a Spanish film. Guillermo del Toro produced it, but he didn't direct it. And it's like this woman returns to this orphanage as an adult. She had grown up there, and she's got her adopted son, and she and her husband are like renovating it and turning it into an orphanage again because like she was like, you know, it was so meaningful to me as a child. And then all these like dark secrets come forward, and the son starts to have this imaginary friend, and you're like, what is the friend? And I don't know. I've taken us far from Oddity, except to say that I do love things like when you're talking about it being set in like a Spanish or Scottish or English castle, and like these sort of paranormal. That's like all in my wheelhouse for sure.
Yeah, I think you'll like it for sure.
I'm sure I will.
And I need to watch both of those now.
And don't worry, I'll like pester you until you do.
I'll be like, Tyler, I know what we're watching tonight.
Yes, exactly.
But yeah, I liked it a lot, and I'm gonna manifest it right now. My dog is yawning with sound at me behind me.
That's okay. Annie was doing a little growling for a moment there.
Yeah, she's adding to the podcast. What was I just saying? Which one was I talking about?
We were talking about Oddity, and then...
Oh, I was about to say that I kind of want to manifest having the writer of that on Bookwild, because I know it doesn't directly correlate, but like I would love to start doing that because I followed him.
For sure.
I found him, and he's the writer and the director. So I'm also going to maybe try to talk to him about it because I think that would be cool.
Do it. It never hurts. Shoot your shot. I love that.
I tagged him in the story, and he liked it. And so now I think my DM would actually be seen by him. So
yeah, probably.
Strategy. So yeah, we'll see. We'll see if Damien, I can't remember his last name, shows up on Bookwild. He just might.
That'd be rad.
So yeah. So you were kind of saying at one point that scary for you is like kind of the unseen stuff. Is that what's typically the scariest for you?
I was trying to think about that. I think it's that moment of tension. Yes, I think that does tend to be the thing that's scariest. I sort of feel like once you see something on screen, your brain starts to be able to deal with it. You know what I mean? It's almost the sort of, to me, it's scarier when you're like, I know there's something bad here, but I don't know when it's going to come. And like, you know, you're queued up in those scary movies with like tense music or tense moments. And every movie you come into, you have this like weight of all the horror movies that you've ever seen before, right? So you have this knowledge. And I really love it when like filmmakers can play with that to like enhance the tension. So for me, it is often like those the moments before it totally hits the fan. Not always, but often is this,
Yes.
to me, that's like the scariest, when you're just sort of tense on edge, being like, oh my God, just do it already. I'm scared, you know?
There is a moment that was the moment in Oddity that when Tyler showed me, he was like, this is terrifying.
Totally.
Like, they had built so much up, and you even know what you think you're about to see.
Yeah.
Even seeing it, you're still like, oh my God.
Totally. Oh, I can't wait to see it. What is it for you that's the scariest? And also, do you find that you're drawn to certain types of scary movies more than others? Because there's so many, like, you know, there's like slasher or paranormal or different things. Like, is something, what genre of horror is scariest to you?
Yeah, so an interesting answer to that question is that we didn't even really start watching as much horror and scary movies, I feel like, until the last like year and a half. Because I think I just always thought it was completely not my vibe. But then, like you're saying, there are genres to it. So not a movie, but like The Haunting of Hill House. I adore
so good.
the way it use horror to like explore like all of the family problems, basically. So like when there's really character driven stuff and horrors in it, I'm typically pretty interested because there's so much you can play with. So like that comes to mind. But then, like, interestingly, what's kind of the scariest to me is like when I was thinking of books that have made me super scared too, is I'm trying to say this without spoiling. I'm trying to make sure I'm not spoiling anything about. I haven't talked about a movie specifically recently right now, so I think I can say it. But like knowing someone is like in the house with you after like thinking about them, like
no thank you.
And like that feeling in a TV show or sorry, in a movie or a book, like when all of a sudden you're like, oh, everything means something different because someone was here with me. That terrifies me.
Yeah, that is a good one. That is really quite scary.
Yeah. Like that one freaked me out the most. There was, and obviously I won't say which book this was, but this all came out into mind when I was thinking about what is scary. So Tyler left, this was like in the fall of last year. He like left for a few days. And so I like picked out the book that I would definitely finish. And it was from an author that I really like, but I've never been like scared reading her books. I don't get too scared reading too many books is what I also realized.
Sure.
I was like, yeah, this is definitely one to like read right now, like when I'm alone. And at like 70%, after this not being in your mind at all as a possibility, you find out that someone's been in the walls of the house watching her. And I was like, I just started this because I thought this was a safe one since I'm alone.
Totally. Like, no,
literally,
thank you.
when I woke up at like 3 in the morning, I was like, am I alone? Like, is someone else here?
Oh. No, thank you. That's, yes. That actually reminds me of, I don't know why, but I do know why. Have you seen the movie The Descent?
No.
Okay. It came out, I don't know, like 2008. And it's basically about this like group of female friends who are, I think they're like spelunkers, and like every year they pick a trip and they do it 1 year after this woman has like lost her family, and then they get stuck underground with like these little like underground critters. It is highly recommend. It was so scary. And I remember watching that with my friends. And I was in college and my boyfriend was sleeping over, and I woke up at like 3 and I heard something in the house, and I woke him up and was like, you got it. Like this is your job as a man. Like, I'm not trying to be gender essentialist, but like we haven't closed the wage gap. So like, you got to be the one to die. So I was like, go look at it. And he was just like, what? Yeah. There's something about that, about your like home is your safe space and it's been invaded and you don't even know. And like that actually makes me think of the only book I've ever read where I consistently had nightmares while I was reading it was the book Helter Skelter by Vincent Bugliosi, which is a true crime book that some people say is more Bugliosi's fantasy about the motives about the Charles Manson case, but it is about the like Charles Manson and the Sharon Tate murders and the LaBianca murders. And I think what was so scary to me was, I don't know if you're familiar with this, they used to do recon before they murdered both of those two like groups. They used to send people in to do what they called creepy crawlies. So like while they were sleeping, they would like crawl through their house and like either take stuff or like basically to like fuck with them and also to like prove that they could get in. And I was just like, forever no. That's the worst thing I could think. Like being asleep and having somebody just like creeping through your house, even if they didn't like harm you at that moment, is somehow
terrible.
So scary. It's such an invasion, you know?
Mm-hmm.
No thanks.
Yep. That definitely gets to me. That one gets to me.
Yeah.
I feel like it's a little more, I don't know, it's a little more of a branch off of scary, but movies or books when like someone decides like the main character's crazy and
yes,
you're like, what do you do from there? Like that,
right.
Like plot lines, like when people stop believing you and you're like, you're believing like the abuser or like whatever. Those are terrifying to me too. And
I agree.
I think I'm sure I know why, but
right.
Like, whew, that stuff.
Right. Because it's
new.
You're right. You can't get out from under it. Like every time you protest it, people are like, well, that's just proof that you are. And you're just like, how would you ever get out? Yeah. That is the thing that like, I find very scary too.
Those are, and those are kind of like dread building is like also what I was thinking about because, J.M. Cannon wrote a recently new book called This Family Lies. And I've talked about it, so some of you are hearing me say it again, but it's about a woman who wakes up after there was an attempt made on her life and her husband was killed, but she like it's really random, like one of her fingers touched the bullet, so it just grazed her head. So she still had some brain damage, but she's alive and awake. However, she doesn't remember the last like 10 years of her life. And so she's living with her in-laws because as far as everyone's telling her, she's like estranged from her family. And so like, of course she's going to stay here with her wealthy in-laws. But then she starts to feel like, I know I don't know who I am the last 10 years, but I don't feel like these are people I would choose to be around. But she has no memory of anything else. But she feels like I think I'm around bad people right now. And I'm like, that was a scary book for me to read. Or just like the dread the whole time where you're like, yes, who am I?
Yeah, totally. And like, right, how would you ever figure out what has been constructed for you by other people? And like, that's really unsettling.
Yes. And they're like really wealthy. So it's like, when she
So it's bad news. Yeah.
Bad news. It's bad news and it's a great book.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Did you see any other horror films in theater this month?
I saw Maxxxine.
I saw Maxxxine too, and I want to know your thoughts because I have thoughts.
Yeah, I loved 2/3 of it, and I'm in the like third act fell apart group.
Same, man. And like that movie for me feels like it could not be more constructed to my taste. You know what I mean? Like Hollywood, Night Stalker, like all of these, the film set of it all. And then the end, I was like, oh, this is the end? Like I thought it just, you know?
So not what I was expecting. I know, because I felt the same way every time I saw the thrillers. I'm like, this is going to be my favorite in the Maxxxine series. Like, it has everything.
Right.
Not as much, but the vibes were all so great for like 60%.
Vibes were immaculate. Mia Goth is great.
So
the visuals of it were beautiful. And then the story just kind of totally. And then the story just kind of fell apart, and it kind of felt first drafty. You know what I mean? Like it felt like it was like it needed a couple more revolutions to get there.
I agree.
Yeah.
I will represent the side of other people because, of course, I just read copious amounts after I watch a movie.
I love it.
Other people's debate, which I think is, it's not even a debate. It's why they liked it, is that Ty West has always wanted to do the genre, the time period of each of those movies. Mm-hmm. He wanted to do an ode to the type of horror films that were being made then. And so some people are like, this was the fun of like Hollywood campy 80s horror films. This was what they felt like. So that's how some people love it.
And I totally see that, and I love that, and I respect that too.
Yep.
And I just wish that the end had felt a little more satisfying.
I still think it could have been campy and satisfying.
Yeah, I agree. I don't have any problem with campiness. Bring on the campy. It was just sort of, I got to the end and I was like, this is like the big bad? I don't know.
Well, and I can say it without spoilers. Like when we left, and like Tyler's not looking for twists in most of the things we watch.
Yeah.
We walked out and he was like, well, that opening scene made it pretty clear who it was going to be.
Right?
Yeah.
And I get that, like, so I've seen Pearl, but I haven't seen X, and I know it's a trilogy, and so I'm sure it was picking up on themes from X, but they are like, well, we can't rely on everybody having seen it or remembering it, so we have to, like, bring stuff back in. But I agree with you, the opening, you're sort of like, so this is it, huh? Like, this is what it is. Like, yeah. Yep.
Yeah. I just think it still have some creativity. Pearl was one of the movies that we were shocked because we went in thinking it was something else. And we were like, in the first 15 minutes, we were like, oh no, we are not period piece people. Like, we knew it had some weirdness to it, but we were like, this far back in time. And then we both loved it by the end because the story just, it's cool.
It is cool. And it's like, I hadn't totally realized he was doing this until I like to read a lot of stuff after I watch things, and talking about the way that it was playing with tropes of like the Wizard of Oz specifically. And like the way that it just makes like a weird, dirty, sexual, murderous Wizard of Oz type stuff. I was like, yes, like this rules, you know?
I need to read that. That's fascinating.
Yeah, I'll see if I can find whatever article I read and kick it to you. Yeah,
it was interesting. I loved the vibe at the beginning. But
yes, and like there's a major set piece. I think I can say this without giving away anything, but like there's a major set piece that takes place on the like film lots, and so you're like running through, and like there's homages to Psycho and all these different things, and I was like, that was so cool. Like I felt like the individual parts of it were so cool, but just sort of didn't add up to what I wanted it to. It didn't add up to much for me, sadly.
Yeah. That's how I ended up feeling. It was probably our least favorite that we saw.
Yeah.
But
which was a shame because I expected it to be like my movie, you know?
There's another one that we're busy, and so we ended up seeing like an 8:30 they do 25 straight minutes of previews now. So you can literally get there 30 minutes late and the movie's just starting. So it's basically 9 o'clock show.
Yeah.
Because I was like, I really want to see this, but like it's always in the smaller theaters. And so we just had to fit it in. And then I was like,
totally.
Oh, that's just how it ended.
Yeah, just like, I agree. I agree. That was a bummer.
Yeah. A Quiet Place.
Oh, how was that one?
Was the other one I saw, and I should have known that I would be sobbing because I have sobbed at the end of the other ones, but I'd kind of forgotten, you know, or like sometimes you're like, I'm not going to sob today.
Right. Like there's no way. Yeah.
So what I'll say about this one is it was one of the most unique takes on a Doomsday story because we start off with Lupita's character. I can't remember. I think her name's Sam in the movie. We start off with her character and she's living in hospice care. So she like doesn't expect to live more than a few weeks at this point. And so from the beginning, I'm like, oh, We are going to just have a meditation on death, aren't we? And that is very much what they did with this movie. There are the, like, to bring it back to scary, those alien looking creatures are terrifying. And they do so well, like making you so scared with everyone, and like the fact that you can't make a single sound. So it's definitely scary too. But like underneath it, there's this whole presence. That was not the right word, but
premise.
Premise, yes.
Yeah,
there it is. There's this premise of like what makes us want to keep living even when we have bad odds against us. And it's both with these aliens, but it's also with disease, like in a cancer that's just killing her. And she's still trying to survive, and she doesn't want to like be eaten by them. So already at the beginning, you're kind of thinking about like how different it is that she's trying to escape it, even though she knows her days are numbered.
Totally.
And I don't want to give too many spoilers. I feel like this isn't. And you can DM me and be mad at me if I ruin it and you really wanted to watch it. But then they include this little relationship that gets developed throughout it, even in the silence, that like made me think of the Ram Dass quote, "We're all just walking each other home."
Oh,
yeah, I started sobbing. Like there were like 15 minutes left in the movie, and all of a sudden I was like, this is going to be one of those ones where like I'm fighting to not disrupt people, because it just like hit me so hard. It hit me so hard. That quote is talking about like all of us are kind of like walking ourselves and each other to our deaths again. Like that even like these relationships we're building with each other is that we're all even kind of walking together toward that. Just like cool sentiments in so many ways. And I don't think it's a spoiler to say that there's a relationship in the movie that feels that way. And so emotionally, that was the most emotional movie I saw all month of the 8. Also very scary. And sometimes it's scary to sit there and feel like you're meditating about death for an hour and a half too.
Totally.
So it fits, but I was crying so much. It was really well.
You've like really sold me on this. Like I saw the first Quiet Place and loved it, and then I didn't see the second one. I'm sure it's great too. And so I'd seen this one and it looked good, but I was sort of like, it's not super high on my list, but like now hearing this piece of it, it actually really is. That sounds incredible.
Yep. And I was the same way. Tyler just wanted to go see the movie that night, and I hadn't been prioritizing it either, because sometimes Doomsday isn't enough for me. But what I should have not forgotten is like, I already knew that like, especially the first one, like that was not just a story about Doomsday. So I knew if I had remembered that, I would have been like, oh yeah. So basically I'm glad that day he was like, I need to get out of the house. Like, what can we see?
Yeah. And I think, I mean, so on top of all the like beautiful emotional layers that those films do, it's such a smart premise for a horror film to be like, we have to be silent, because it is inherently tense for the audience to be like waiting for somebody to make a noise. Like it is such a tense movie experience. It makes me think of a couple months ago, I got asked to do something really crazy, which was to comment on a documentary that was being made about this writer, Cornell Woolrich. And it was in honor of the reissue of a 1952 Argentinian film called Never Open That Door. No abras nunca esa puerta. Puerta? My Spanish is no bueno. But so it's basically 2 short films, and they're both great. And they're noir, and they're like highly recommend anybody watch these. They're really good. They're really great thrillers, and they're kind of like 45-ish minutes each. But the second one has a segment in it that's like 7 minutes of drawn out, tense, totally silent. And it's like this old woman creeping through a house trying to like remove guns from like these bandits who have like come to stay, and she can't make a noise, and she's blind, so she can't see anything, and they move things in the house, and it's like some of the most tense filmmaking I've ever seen, and it's from the 1950s, and you're just sitting there being like, oh my god, is she gonna do it? And it's so good. And it makes me think of, it was like, it felt like, oh, that's also, it's The Quiet Place. It was The Quiet Place, but in the 1950s. And like, highly recommend that film. And there's just something so tense as a viewer for like, you can't make a noise. And in this case too, she's blind. So she's having to do it all by hand. And it's so good.
Tension is such an experience.
Yes.
Like you are locked in.
Mm-hmm. It's incredible.
It reminds me of what I always say I love about the first Alias Emma book called Alias Emma. Mm-hmm. Where she basically, this spy has to get, she has to protect someone who is the son of ex-Russian spies, basically. Like, because they turned on their country, people are coming after their son. Mm-hmm. So the main character has to secure him and just bring him in. She thinks it's not going to be that big of a deal. And then CCTV is hacked by the Russians. And so she has to get him all the way across London to a safe house on the other side of London without going in front of any CCTV camera. And
oh my God, how would you do it?
Of English books, the CCTV is everywhere there, like even more than we have it. So what you're saying about the tension is so wild the entire book, and it takes place over 12 hours. Yes. And the whole book that you're like, oh my God. And then they finally get somewhere safe. And then someone did find them, and now she's like fighting off guys while this dude is like useless behind her.
I love it.
So,
oh my God, that sounds great.
Tension. You're like, and then it's kind of a layer of don't make a sound. It's you can't be seen. It's like do this and be invisible.
Right.
So tense.
So tense.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, so good. I have a movie I saw recently. I'm curious if you've seen it or heard of it. It wasn't in. Well, I don't think it was in theaters, or if it was a super limited release, but it was streaming on AMC Plus that has also that Shudder network. Like they do all those like scary movies. And it was called Late Night with the Devil. And it's, oh my God. It's not like jump out of your seat scary, but I thought the vibes were like immaculate. It basically is the story of this man who's like a 1970s late night talk show host, kind of like akin to Johnny Carson, and basically may or may not have sold his soul to the devil to like rise through the ranks. But it's also like a found footage thing of like this infamous episode of his show where it goes off the rails and like are people actually being possessed and like all this crazy stuff is happening. And it's just got this like 1970s vibe. I think it came out in 2023. I loved it. I thought it was really well done. Again, it's not, thinking back to kind of like the question of our show is like, what makes something scary? It's not a movie that I sat there being like jumping out of my seat, but it was tense and definitely horror and just like really well made, I thought.
That sounds amazing. Yeah. And until you explained it, I didn't catch that it's a late night with the devil because it's like a late night television.
Exactly.
Cool. We're going to have to watch that. We've been needing now that we've watched everything in theaters.
I know you guys have like got to wait for Friday to see what else is coming out.
Well, The Trap is coming out on Friday, which is a Josh Hartnett.
What's The Trap? Oh, yes, that one looks great.
He's a serial killer.
Yeah.
And he's at a huge a huge concert with his daughter. He even said he went to a Taylor Swift concert for research. We're like, okay, Josh.
Amazing. Sure. What great research.
So he's like in a huge crowd of people like that. And he's then having to try to escape out of that.
Yeah. Totally.
So I'm excited for that one.
It looks good. Yeah. It looks really good.
I know.
Yeah.
I'll definitely be watching that one.
Me too.
But it's like, I also just like thrillers. That's like the other part of it. I think there are different parts of thrillers that feel scary sometimes, but I'm just down for the thrills, you know?
Do you notice, are there things that you like, is there a difference between what you find scary or what you like in scary books versus like scary movies?
I feel like I don't read tons of scary books is what I realized when I was just looking through my list. And And as far as movies go, what I can't do is body horror, like extended
Sure.
gore. I will never watch a Saw
Yeah.
movie. So it's like even that, sometimes
Sure.
I'm like, is it because it's scary or is that just like it's a different thing to me? Like
Yeah.
so I can't handle body horror no matter where it is, books or movies. Books, when I was thinking about books, the scariest ones I've read have been like Nordic noir type stuff.
Yeah.
Where like, which is kind
Totally.
of similar to Longlegs. That's what I would have also told people about Longlegs. Is
Mm-hmm.
if you've read Nordic noir, it probably feels similar to that. But Nordic noir is really known for like you're sometimes in the serial killer's mind. There are these like elaborate kill scenes often. And so those ones are the ones where like sometimes you are just like, wow, there are some creepy people in the world. So I think that scares me, but I don't need like too much horror. The closest I got to horror here recently was John Fram's No Road Home. But that is like horror light. It was more like gothic horror, in my opinion. So I don't read like who is the really popular horror?
I mean, Stephen King is like probably
I don't.
Yeah, that's I would say. Like his book Pet Sematary is one of the scariest books I've ever read, and it's different, right? Because it's like books you're using so much of your imagination, so it's like there's ways in which it can be scarier, and then there's ways in which it's less scary because you can kind of turn it off and like set it down and just be like, I don't want to feel this tension tonight. But something about that book, I was just like, no, thank you, no, thank you. I mean, I loved it, but I was also like, not here for little children demonically possessed saying terrible things they shouldn't be saying, and cats coming back wrong, and like no.
That wouldn't work. But books, there's that. Same thing. Now I won't mention either title, but one of the books that scared me the most is another book where truly the twist is that someone has been living in her house for like weeks.
Oh,
weeks. No. And your stomach just drops when you get to that answer. Like, that one will always be in my mind as one of the scariest things I read.
You're going to have to like text me after and tell me what books you think you've been talking about, because I want to know.
I totally will. I still haven't pulled up. But yeah, like Nordic noir, I think is what gets closest here. It's so visual. Like they really will exploit some of these crime scenes and you're like, oh God, like it just sounds terrible.
No, totally. And there's something about, I don't know, like again, we talk about the vibes, like the Nordic noir, Longlegs has this too. It's kind of snowy and like rural and remote, and just the sense of sort of like you're alone and your environment is conspiring against you too. Like even though it's not necessarily like, it's not like Longlegs is about like a haunted field, but like you can be trapped out there with evil and like nothing can get through to you, and like that is such a scary idea, you know.
That is also what's kind of creepy about a book I keep talking about, The Hunter's Daughter. Because you're kind of like, is there an evil forest god? Like, you're like, is she safe out there?
Oh, The Hunter's Daughter. I'm going to write that one down. That sounds interesting.
Slovenic, I think.
Okay.
Oh, I think you'll like it. It's very, very gritty. And
I like that. I always like gritty.
Yeah, and then very twisted.
Yeah.
I also like the serial killer at the heart of that book. I was like, this is wild how well written this is. And the woman who wrote it has a PhD in criminology, something like that. And I was like, okay, wow, I see why this was really good.
You're like, that's why. Yeah, that's what's up.
Yeah,
amazing.
Really good. Do you read some scary books, or are your reading and TV, reading and watching preferences different?
Yeah, I would say like I definitely do read some horror because there really is so much overlap in like horror and thriller. Like even Stephen King, I mean, I would say Pet Cemetery is certainly strictly horror, but then you take something like Misery, and while it has horror elements, it's also more of a thriller. You know what I mean? Like there's ways in which the genres kind of like go together. So I don't read a huge amount of horror, but I do read some. I've read I wrote a couple of other things. This year, one of the ones that I read that was a standout was Maeve Fly by C.J. Lead.
It's really weird, right?
Yeah, with the eyeball. So it's a great book, and it really is. So it's the story of this woman who I don't think it's giving things away. She's got murderous proclivities, let's say, and she lives with her grandmother and like is very like Halloween coded. Like their house is like known as like the spooky horror house because they have like skeletons up year round, and it's in LA. And she during the day she doesn't totally name it because I think you can't, but she's essentially a Disney princess. Like I think she's Elsa from Frozen at the park.
Nice.
And then by night she's like stalking the men of LA. And it's really well done. It's really well written. And it did have some elements of body horror that like even I feel like I have a pretty strong stomach for stuff and was like, dear God, like it's really good. But like that is the thing that people should know going into it is like she does some great and disgusting stuff where I was just like, wow, her editor did not tell her to pull back, and I love it. And so, but it's good. And she has another one coming out maybe even this year that I actually think you would like. I don't know if it'll have body horror elements to it, but I think it's called American Rhapsody, and it's basically about like I think it's a road trip book, and it's got something to do with like evangelical churches and like going wrong. Like I think it's going to be really interesting. It's been getting great reviews. And she's really cool. She's an LA writer. And actually she was recommended to me by Rachel Harrison, who is a horror writer that I read religiously because she is wonderful. And so her first book was called The Return, and it's basically like this group of friends, and one of them goes missing, like out in a forest on a run, and then eventually comes back, like is found, but she comes back wrong. And so then the friends go on a girls' trip to this inn, which is kind of modeled on a famous Californian inn called the Madonna Inn, which if you're not familiar with it, you should look it up. Each room is a theme, and they're like these crazy Baroque, like, so one is like the rock room, and like everything in it is made of rock, like including the bed. And like one is like the luau room, and it's like very like 1970s Hawaiian tropical theme. So they're staying at this hotel, and I think it's only them and maybe a few other guests. And the friend is like devolving into something other. And Rachel Harrison has this kind of she puts out basically a book a year, and she has one coming out this fall, and I think it's called So Thirsty. And it's her vampire book. She kind of like takes a trope and like leans into it. And she writes what I would call like millennial woman horror, where it's like, oftentimes they're also kind of circling issues for like millennial women, and they're scary, but they're not, it's not like CJ Lead where I came out of it and I was like, I feel forever changed. Like they're really and that's not, I feel like there's no way I can say it that doesn't sound like I'm putting somebody down, but like hers at times almost feel like cozy horror. Like they're horror, but you come out of it and you're like, oh, I feel good, and like all of this has been resolved. CJ Lead, I came out and I was like, I just had my hair like blown back, and I was like, I don't know what that was, but it was. They're both excellent experiences, but like Rachel Harrison is like a must buy for me. Like the second book that she announces, I'm there picking it up and reading it. She's just fabulous.
I wonder if I would like more horror reading wise. What I love more action. I need more action thrillers again.
Yeah. I mean, I would maybe give Rachel Harrison a try, because it's not going to be something that you're going to be like, it's not going to have that body horror element in the same way.
Return everywhere.
All of her books are great. The Return is great. Her second one is basically a take on like witches. The third one is werewolves. The fourth one is sort of like the Antichrist, Bad Sheep. That actually might be my favorite of her books so far, which is like this woman gets invited. She's kind of escaped her family's religious upbringing, and she gets invited back home for a wedding between her favorite cousin and her ex-boyfriend, who she still has feelings for. And then it just like all devolves, and it's great. It's so good.
Oh, you just found a whole other author for me.
Oh yeah, Rachel Hare, and she's great. Like you should definitely maybe have a conversation with her if you're ever interested, because she's like phenomenal.
I want to. If I like the book, I'm like, I've got to talk to this person.
Totally.
Oh, it's hard as talking. Well, we had like one of the books I'm not going to talk about anymore because it was the spoiler that I discussed earlier. But the books that have scared me, I think, the most. Can you hear them?
I can hear the dogs, a little bit. But now we're good.
Room, but it's okay.
Yeah.
They're tearing down the curtains. Harley. Okay. One of the scariest reading experiences I had was when Gare finally convinced me to read Stalker, which is a Yona Linna the series by Lars Kepler. And it is terrifying because it is a serial killer who sends video footage to the police of the person that he's about to kill and doesn't tell them who it is. And they have like 15 minutes to try to use like this limited footage they have, right?
No.
Try to save these people. And it's just like thinking of someone like recording you and like they're about to kill you and you don't even know it yet. Like, terrifying.
Yeah, that is terrifying. That is very, and like I like this trope, and I also find it terrifying anytime somebody like plays games like that, and you know you're probably not going to win. You know, where it's almost worse to be given the chance of like you could save somebody, but you're not going to, than just like not even having that opportunity. It's so
it
creepy.
Is creepy, and it's Nordic noir as well. But this was another Nordic noir that Kate recommended to me that was definitely like had me looking at chestnuts differently. The Chestnut Man by Soren Sveistrup. I'm sure I did right.
Yes.
But this one has a serial killer who literally builds little chestnut men out of chestnuts and like sticks and leaves them behind after he kidnaps his victims, I think. I don't know. He leaves them behind after either a bad killing or a kidnapping. And you're in his perspective sometimes. Or no, you shift into the perspective of the victims each time a victim gets killed. And it is just so creepy. Like, they like...
That sounds so creepy.
They don't know that it means they're about to die, and you're like, oh. So that one's really creepy too. I thought I kicked my dog, but it was actually something else under the table. I was like, oh no, what did I just hit?
Oh no.
Well, yes, the little people in Europe, they just write some crazy stuff.
Yeah, they do.
But yeah, I feel like we had a good conversation about what scary is. I'm definitely interested in anyone else's opinions too.
Me too. I'm very curious about what people find scary. I mean, yeah, I'm very curious.
Yeah. So you can DM either of us and we can all have a little chat about it.
That would be great.